Hi everyone, and welcome to this new dawn and the era of AI. My name is Ro, and this is Abby. Say hi, Abby.
Hey everyone, Abby here, and hi to you too, Ro. Well, isn't AI just the flavor of the year here?
It certainly is.
Well, yeah, in the last 3 months, I've heard about this word large language models for the first time in my life, and now I have to hear it every single day. And the other one is Copilot. Like, when does this word get used in GitHub and Excel prior to this year? And honestly, everybody is talking about AI, like developers, non beginners, non-technical people, my 90-year-old grandparents, literally everyone seems to suddenly have access to AI. This is crazy. Have you been seeing that too?
Yeah, definitely. I see the same thing too. Now, if you think about it, AI has been making waves for a few years now. And we've been talking about democratized AI, and we've seen applications such as image or issue classification or natural language understanding. And we've been playing with bots and virtual personal assistants for a while now. But with these new transformer models, new use cases are emerging and becoming a reality. So things like question answering or summarization or reasoning over structured or unstructured data and many more.
Yeah, it's kind of like Bing AI writing assistant, right? It makes me sound a lot more eloquent than I am, so I love it.
Ooh, I'm guilty of that one too. But what's really exciting, as you mentioned, is everyone's talking about it, and because everyone's talking about it, there's more investment in here, there's more funding in here, which leads to a lot more innovation. So I personally can't wait to see how this space progresses over this year.
Yeah, well, what's most exciting to me actually is, someone was telling me that human language has emerged as that hot new programming language. And actually, that's so true, right? Like we're so busy as application developers trying to stay on the bleeding edge of technology. And now what we realize is that, the people who can make these new innovations, these new ideas, people who can make them happen is right there. Like our developers, but also our marketers, folks that interact directly with users. They don't have to be they don't have to be people inside the code base. Like the ideas are there, the potential is there. And so really it's a good opportunity to bring together the entire business, tap into everyone's creativity. And it's just such a good opportunity for everybody to think outside of the box together and build the future of our applications together. So I guess what I just said was describe a hackathon.
Yes, you did, Abby. Now, a question that Abby and I get asked quite often is, well, all of this sounds exciting. I want AI, but how do I make that opportunity real? Like, how do we make it ours? So, very excited to talk to you about this little toolkit that we've put together with the idea that we wanted to make AI easy and accessible for everyone. We've built it on the Azure platform with the intention that, whether you're brand new to the field or you're experienced, you can get up and running quickly and make the most out of it as you integrate your own apps, your own data, your own ideas into it, and make it fun, make it exciting.
Yeah, like involve everyone and get ideas from every corner of your business. So, yeah, that sounds good, bro. Let's get hacking.
Awesome, let's go.
All right, Ro. So, what do we have here? AI Hackathon Starter Kit.
That's right, Abby. So this is the homepage of the AI Hackathon Starter Kit. And if you have a look at the top navigation bar, all of the different functionality that hits either our speech services or our language services is listed up there, as well as our complete and chat endpoint, which will be hitting the Azure OpenAI services.
Cool. Well, let's jump in and have a play, shall we?
Awesome. So we'll probably start with transcription. Give that a go and let's play with it.
Oh, let's see how it goes. Hello, everyone. I'm Abby, and today we're walking through the AI Hackathon Starter Kit. I can't wait to see what we build. Well, I have now stopped the transcription.
You can hit the copy button and then we can use this text that you've transcribed and kind of play with it and analyze it.
Cool, analyze it. Let's go to the Analyze tab. Oh, look, it's right there.
the key thing is you can choose the type of analysis that you wish to be performed by hitting the drop down there.
Cool. Well, let's try with analyzing the sentiment. I hope I was
That's
positive here.
Well, we'll see. So once the response comes back, you can see a big JSON payload here.
Cool. Well, at least I'm neutral.
There you go. Now, the way it kind of works is it takes a larger sentence and it can break that down into its component parts and then analyze it, with the sentiment. And then, if you've got like a larger piece of transcription, you can then analyze the sentiment of the transcription over time as well. So lots that can be done here.
Cool. Yeah, I'm gradually getting more and more positive. If I had another sentence, I'll be like, oh, I'm so excited, and it would come out positive. Awesome.
That's
well,
right.
this is cool, and this is given it to me as a JSON payload, so I can then go and use this as a serialized object, or I could use curl and pass it off to something else if I wanted to.
That's right, Abby. And again, we'll see this with some of the other types of analysis that we perform as well. So you've got a JSON object that you could play with. Maybe the next one that we could try is we can extract the key phrases from here.
Oh, let's try that. Begin analyzing. Cool, just a few, but in quite a short sentence. I think that is basically the key phrases.
There you go. And again, another one that we might try is seeing if there's any PII information in here.
Oh, so in here, I'm probably expecting my name to come up as PII, but let's see what else it reckons.
Possibly, yeah. So it's able to extract a whole bunch of different entities, but it does notice that Abby is
A person?
is PI is a person, yeah, which is a person, and you can see the redacted text there as well. And something really great here is, let's say if you have any sort of financial information, so let's say a credit card number. So let's maybe add a valid credit card number in there, Abby.
Oh,
So you could use I think it's the number 4 with 15 ones.
Oh, there we go. Let me give it my credit card number and see if it recognizes that. So, there we go. With a 0.85 confidence score, it's pretty confident that this is a credit card number, and it will redact it in the text here as well. Awesome.
That's right. So again, you can use a whole bunch of different APIs. Now we've also got the API for extracting entities or extracting healthcare entities, but maybe we'll use a different text there that's a bit more relevant for those.
Well, incidentally, I was just talking to our friend Daniel Scott Rainsford, and he has a great prompt library, and one of these is a referral request from the GP practice to Contoso Health Fracture Clinic. So let's use that. I'm pretty sure there's going to be quite a bit of entities, but also medical entities in here. So what I have just pasted is a referral letter from Dr. Jenny Jones of the Contoso Medical Centre General Practice, and Dr. Jones has sent through a referral letter for Fred Smith about an upper elbow fracture, and there's quite a bit of information being passed from the doctor to the fracture clinic. So let's look at what entities are in here.
Yeah, this is a great example. So just hit the begin analysis button and let's see what pops up here.
Cool. It's found an organization being the fracture clinic. It's found a skill. It's found organizations, person type. Yep, this is all looking pretty good.
That's right. So it has a whole types of known categories that's going to try and match entities based on the categories as well. And then there are specific ones for healthcare if we were to hit the healthcare example.
Let's try healthcare entities. So it's going through looking for specific healthcare related entities, which are probably quite different and jargony compared to our everyday entities.
That's
All
right.
right, so what's all this?
I've modified the payload a bit to convert the entities that come back into text as well, which is why it took a bit of time. But if you just wanted to scroll down, you can look at the rest of the JSON payload to understand the specific healthcare type entities that come back. And again, if you work in the healthcare field, they'll make a bit more sense to you. So here we can see there's a category of sign or symptom, and it tells you that that's the normalized text is a fracture, and like these are the data sources that come back for it. So there'll be again, we've got like a care environment of a clinic, so a whole bunch of different medical entities that are popping up here.
Cool. Well, this will be really useful if I was building an application for the healthcare industry or in a medical context. Then all this, I could then just choose which category I want to pull out, and the JSON payload will have everything I need, including the data sources of where it's actually extracted that entity from.
That's correct. And I think if you have a look at the bottom, there's also this concept of linked entities as well. So that's worthwhile having a look and seeing, how you can use this as you build out, any healthcare examples.
Oh, well, this payload is quite long, so
it is quite big. Yeah.
Let's so yeah, it is in there somewhere. Let's just scroll all the way up now.
All right. So now, as you scroll up, probably the next two examples that we'll look at are examples for our Azure OpenAI service. So let's go to the complete endpoint, and then later on we'll talk about the chat endpoint. Now, before we try anything out, like the thing to look at is the settings button. So if you hit the settings button, you can see all of the different settings that we will be using here for the text completions.
Cool. And you've very kindly put a more generally understandable description of what each of these settings are, so I don't need to be an AI expert to really know exactly what temperature, top P, etc.
Yeah, and like for now, again, like we'll likely be just playing with like temperature, top P, and there's a great video from our friend Daniel that we'll link below that talks about how to write better prompts and what are the settings that you should be using if you want your answers to be a bit more creative or a bit more deterministic. So we'll link that down below, and he's amazing. So I'm sure you'll love that session.
Oh, awesome. Well, let's keep it as is and jump back into our. So we've got a free text box here again.
That's right. So you can hit the clear button and we can try a couple of prompts. Now, the thing to remember is if you have a look at the heading, you can also see that this completion endpoint is coming via OpenAI, and we're hitting the text DaVinci 3 model. Again, with the starter kit, it allows you to choose either hitting OpenAI or Azure OpenAI. So yeah, everyone's welcome in case you didn't have access to Azure OpenAI but had access to OpenAI.
Cool. So when we go into the code and when we deploy it, I'm guessing there's some form of switch either in the code or in the environment file. That means when I deploy my own version, it is what I want it to be.
That's right, Abby. So we'll have a look at that later on. But for now, I think you mentioned some amazing prompts from Daniel's library.
Yeah, let's go and look for this one here. All right, using Text DaVinci 003. So thank you to Daniel. He's provided us some great prompts. Let's throw it in here and see what it's giving us. Oh, so let's see what's in here. So this is quite a long prompt. What it includes is a bit of a context setting to say that we are asking the service to be a medical AI assistant. We are giving it a prompt, asking it to extract the relevant medical information, along with a referral letter, which is pretty similar to the one we used in the last example, quite short and from Doctor Who through to the fracture clinic team.
Yes,
and
Abby,
what,
Sorry, go for it.
Oh yeah, and what we've also given it is a response. So we've actually provided it an entire response of what we're expecting, and then we have a second prompt, which is our letter from our friend Jenny Jones, and it does not include the response yet. So I'm guessing we're sending this off to the service and asking it to complete the rest of the text here.
That's correct, Abby. So the example that Daniel's put together here is a great example of something called one-shot or few-shot learning. And the idea being that here you give it an example of the expected payload so that when you get the response back, it's going to give you a response within that JSON structure. Now, if you're not getting the right response, we'll play with the settings, but let's give that a go and see how the model responds.
Well, let's ask it to process this for me.
Right. Now, the process response will appear at the bottom of the page. So let's wait for the response from the Azure OpenAI service.
So that is now generated. So I've got, this is a text version of my entire prompt. So this is basically what I've sent it.
That's right. So the blue parts are what you sent it, and then you've got the actual response coming back as response one, and there's also a JSON payload of the actual API call.
All right, so I can see that it's sent through all the information in the settings. So if I didn't want this particular model, or I wanted the temperature to be higher or lower, it would be reflected in the JSON payload that we send off to the service.
That's correct. And then the actual response is under the choices text text parameter. And we can see an extracted version of that. So just by looking at it, it looks like a string-apart version of the JSON response that we were expecting.
Yeah, and it's got reason, history, presentation, etc., which is exactly what I had given it in the example.
That's correct. So it seems to be coming back as expected here.
Oh, so hypothetically, if I hadn't given it this one-shot example, so if I'd maybe just taken out this example here, which means I have not actually given the service any information about what I'm expecting, and I'm basically just asking it to give me a response, provided that I've told it what it is, the context of it being a medical AI assistant, and I'm asking it to extract the relevant medical information. So should we give this a go and see what it gives us?
Yeah, just give it a go and let's see what happens. Again, it's going to try its best, but it doesn't have the necessary context to come back as the expected JSON. So let's see the sort of response that this gives us.
Yeah, cool. So here we have not provided it with the JSON, and it's given us what looks like a bullet point formatted list, which is very good. It does exactly, it does really what we want it to, which is summarize, who the patient is, their medical history, their symptoms, etc. But if I was expecting a particular format, so that I could input it into a table or put it into some form of management system, then I should really be giving it some specific instructions in the prompt with a couple of examples, so then it knows exactly what I'm wanting. But otherwise, it has done a pretty good job of completing the block of text I give it, which is to put in response and wait for the service to give it back to me.
That's correct, Abby. And again, we'll link to Daniel's video that has some great insights into different prompt engineering techniques to get to make the most out of your models. But for now, let's actually have a look at the chat completions endpoint that comes with the newer models for Azure OpenAI. So in the completions example, we were using text to G3. Here, as you can see, we're going to be using the GPT 3.5 Turbo model. Again, if you have access to GPT-4, feel free to point it there. But the structure in which you compose your prompt is a bit different here, Abby. So as you can see, we've got a little gray box, and it has the system role. And this is what you use to set up a context. So the first box is always going to be a system box. And then you can click that purple button that says add a new reply from here. And like we did in the previous example, you can either just send it a message. So here you could just say, because the system context is that you're an AI assistant, you can just say, hi, my name is Abby, and wait for a completion. So let's try that maybe.
Oh, hi, I'm Abby.
Right.
So process completion.
That's correct. Yeah. And as you can see the assistant responded saying, hi, Abby, how can I assist you today? Because in the system message right up top, we just said you're an AI assistant. And you can kind of chat with this endpoint here.
Cool. So I could basically ask it any questions that the foundation model might know the answer to. And this is the same as, any other chat-like interface that we may have used, such as ChatGPT, in terms of talking to an assistant.
Yes, it is similar to that. If you notice at the bottom here, there's a bit of a JSON payload that you can see here, which has essentially the chat history. So every time you're actually hitting that endpoint, you're passing it in the entire context of the history. Those chat completion endpoints, they don't necessarily store a session of any sort. So every time you interact with it, you do have to send it the history that you want to pass to it.
Oh, awesome. So I'm going to have to be quite careful if I have very long chat histories that I'm going to be end up passing sort of longer and longer JSON payloads because I'm including all my previous history, or I guess the application or the previous history that the developer of the application has decided it wants to pass back to the service for the next completion. Then we just have to be mindful, I guess, of the token limits. So that we're not using all the tokens and passing information through.
That's correct, Abby. So there are a couple of different ways of doing it. You might just say that I'm going to pass back the last X number of messages. So you might give it a cutoff number there. And what you can also do is as the conversation progresses, you can constantly summarize the outcome of that and pass that as context within these prompts as well. So different mechanisms, but again, for our hackathon, we won't worry about that.
Oh, awesome.
Awesome. So again, here, Abby, you mentioned an interesting prompt that you saw from Daniel's examples for healthcare.
Yeah, should I just delete these messages? Does that clear the previous, I guess that clears the JSON payload, so I'm not sending...
Yeah, you could do that, or I think if you just hit refresh, that works too, but yeah, either way.
All right, so we've got a system message. Let me just hit refresh just in case. So let's pass. So when we were doing the completions demo, we had this section in the front, which I said was setting the context about what the AI was. Whoops. So right. This is the system message.
That is correct. So even just looking at the chat markup language that you saw on the previous page, you can kind of tell what message each part is. If you notice the first line, it says I am start system. And then on the fourth line, it says I am start user. And then like down the page, you can see the same thing for assistant. So you're basically going to be copying those bits within to set up the context. And it's just setting it up a bit differently here.
Oh, yeah. So I will add a new reply. So in this case, because I'm clicking add new reply from here, what I'm actually giving it is similar to the one-shot learning example. I'm basically giving it a bit of a mock conversation, I guess, of what the user, so this is the information the user sent to the assistant. And now I'm going to also play back what hypothetically the assistant should have responded. Like this. So this is, so in the payload, yep. So in the payload, it is effectively adding that almost as if it was past history.
That's right, Abby. So here we've given it one example, and then you hit the add new reply from here, and this is where you'd pass in your actual the actual use case that you have here with this referral letter.
Cool. So now what the system knows, it's already known from the previous history that with prompts such as the ones we're about to give it, this is the type of response. So now I'm going to give it a different prompt, which is our referral letter about Mr. Smith from Dr. Jenny Jones, and I'm going to click process completions, and that's going to send off everything down here to the assistant, and we're expecting the assistant to give us a response.
That's right. So let's kick that off, and hopefully the response that we get here is in the similar JSON format that we were expecting from the chat completions endpoint.
Cool. It is indeed.
There you go.
Cool. So then if I were using this in a chat scenario, I could then, I guess, ask it information that isn't necessarily yet another example of the same prompt, but I could ask it what was Mr. Smith recommended to do. Would that then, I'm guessing, Rode, that would use based on the examples here, or based on the information we'd given it, it would give me an answer?
Yes, because as you noticed earlier, we're passing in the entire payload. So as long as it has that right context, it's going to try its best to come up with an answer. So let's see what answers come back with.
Yeah, so there was my question, and the assistant has come back to me saying Mr. Smith was advised to follow RIC for the affected limb. Yep, and that looks like it has indeed extracted the information based on what it knows from what I'd passed in here, and somewhere here I had told the assistant that Jenny Jones has had a particular recommendation, and it's now given that back to me. So that's really useful for interaction scenarios.
Yes, and again, depending on the scenario that you have, this is where, when they say that prompt engineering is as much art as it is science, you'll definitely need to play with the settings and probably a prompt as well. And the things that you probably will start playing with are the temperature and the top P, to see if you want your model to be deterministic, so you can put the temperature as low as possible. But on the other hand, you still want it to be, you wanted to have the right level of creativity to make certain inferences from the sort of input that it has. So you'll need to play with that and see what works for your context.
Yeah, awesome. And I can imagine outside of a medical industry or other regulated industries, if I was using this as a marketing chatbot, I might want it to be a bit more creative, so it can add some extra flair than just giving me back information that I had already passed it.
That is correct. So I guess we'll close the settings and maybe close the session out by using some of the speech APIs. So if you wanted to just copy the last response that we got from the bot, so maybe the assistant's response to the recommendations, and let's just hit the speech endpoint here and just paste that through.
Words to be spoken. So here I am asking the service to go and speak this sentence back to me.
That's correct.
Well, let's hear it.
Mr. Smith was advised to rest, ice, compress, and elevate the affected limb, as well as to take analgesics and use a sling for immobilization.
Awesome. So this is hitting the speech service. Again, I've used the default voice. There is an ability to customize this voice to a particular region, or you might have a custom speech service as well. But I suppose this is a great example that we could use to just get started across these different services, or whether it is speech, cognitive services, language cognitive services, or the Azure OpenAI service. Great place to start.
Yeah, awesome.
Thanks. And if you scroll down at the bottom of the page, there should be a link to the GitHub repo.
Cool. So here's the repository.
That's right. And if you scroll down, like, the thing I wanted to highlight here is we wanted to make this as inclusive and as easy for people to use, whether you're a beginner or you've used it before. So that's the thing you want to look for.
Cool. So I'm thinking, if I was a product manager, or say a customer support person, or someone that comes from the business context and isn't necessarily a developer, it means that I can still deploy, even without writing any extra code, I can still deploy a service that looks exactly like this and be able to play around with the different capabilities of these AI services. But then if I was a developer and I had the dev team on, then developers can then use add my magic. So developers can add code here if we're wanting to send it off to a different API or to perform extra business logic, send it off to a CRM. We would put it in here as part of, I guess, the content of the hackathon, right? And not worry about having to set up all the boilerplate.
That's absolutely right, Abby. And now, as in the next section, as we do a bit of a walkthrough in terms of setting up, setting up whether it is the cloud services or whether it is the code on your dev machine, there are also some really interesting portals that the rest of the team can go to. So if you're not a developer, there's a portal for the speech service, there's a portal for the Azure OpenAI service, and there's a portal for the language service that you could also play with. And contribute and imagine all of the different use cases that are possible for your business.
Oh, awesome. Well, let's jump over there and I can take on the persona of someone who's got a completely clean machine, and let's see how easy it is to set this all up. Cool, Rose. So how do we get started? So I've got your instructions here. So getting started?
That's right. So we'll start with a whole bunch of our prerequisites. And to get started, we need to create the 3 key services that we need. So we need an Azure Cognitive Services for speech, we need an Azure Cognitive Service for language, and we need an Azure Cognitive Service for OpenAI. Now, again, with the Azure Cognitive Service for OpenAI, at the time of recording this video, there's a link that we need to go to and submit a form to apply for it. But if you don't have that, we could very easily use the Azure. We could very easily use the OpenAI service directly.
Oh, well, so I see you've linked some of these links here. So I will just jump over to the tab that I already have open. It's inside my Azure portal, and let's get started creating resources.
That's right. So we'll probably start by creating our speech resource first. So you can either search for speech up there or just hit the create a resource button, whatever works for you.
Cool. So speech services.
That's right.
Cool. I will create a speech service.
Mm-hmm. Now, as you create this, again, use the right subscription ID. You need to have a subscription for this. And like any other service within Azure, we'll need to chuck it in a resource group. So
I don't have one yet, so let me create a new one.
Yep.
Oh, let's see if it accepts that. Right, I will continue to use East US for now.
Sure.
And what I am naming is for my speech service, so I'll go AI Hack Speech.
I think with the pricing tier, there's a choice between free or standard. You could choose either. If you have anything else that's using free, you probably might get an error. So in this video, Abby, if you wanted to choose a standard service, because I'm not sure if you're using any other free services here.
Well, let's just use standard. But I guess for the audience watching, depending on the use case, there's different pricing levels, especially for production workloads.
You might want to hit the view pricing details button quickly while we're showing everyone. Because if you hit that button, it should pop up a pricing table. And in the pricing table, you can kind of see, depending on the region where we're spinning things up, what the free tier and the standard tier allows us to do.
Yeah, cool. So the link is available as you set up the service. So we will just jump back to the portal. I guess I'll just accept defaults for the remaining and go click review and create.
So for our hack, I think that should be enough.
Cool. So it's passed validation, and now I can actually create. So if I just open, yep, the deployment succeeded. So if I just open the AI hack resource group in the background,
you should see the service under that resource group.
Yep. So I've got my AI hack speech, and I should be creating my other services inside the same resource group for the purpose of this hack because they share the same life cycle. So I can just go on from here.
Sure. So probably the next one we can create is the language service.
Oh, so language service from Microsoft.
Yeah. Just a big call out that when you create this, we need the language service, not the language understanding service, because they're two different things.
Cool. And we are also showing creating it via the marketplace. There's quite a few different ways to create a service in Azure, but basically it will go through to the same spot. So I will continue to create my resource, and here's the familiar resource creation view.
There you go. So very similar. You've got your resource group chosen, choose a pricing tier and give it a name. Again, same thing. You can use a free service if you haven't deployed another free language service before, or for the purpose of the demo, let's use the standard service. Similarly, pricing details are always available here. And in this form, you might need to check the box certifying that you understand our responsible AI policies.
Cool. And I'll accept defaults for the rest and jump into creation of this one. Cool.
Awesome. So that's done.
Succeeded.
Yeah. Now in the resource group, we can see both your speech service and your language service. And the next thing that we need is the Azure OpenAI service.
Azure OpenAI. Cool. So I already have one in here, but let's create a new one for this demo. In familiar views, just choosing my AI hack resource group.
Now, the thing with Azure OpenAI service is there is it's available at the time of recording this in, I think, 4 regions. So we've got East US, you've got South Central US, France Central, and West Europe. So when you deploy this, newer regions might be showing up here. And similarly, you've got with the pricing tier, you have the view for pricing details, and this comes in the standard tier.
I'm just going to accept defaults for now.
That's right, you can accept the defaults, and that should ideally pass your validation. Obviously, when you are running this for production, that's where you have customized settings based on your use case.
Cool.
We'll wait for the deployment to be submitted, and once the resource is done, we'll kick off the next bit.
Cool. All right, so our deployment of the Azure OpenAI service is done. So I will just go back to our resource group, and I have all 3 of the required cloud services.
That's right, Abby. And the great thing here is that each of these services have their own portal that yourself or the rest of your team in your hack can play with. The thing I did want to show is let's start probably with the speech service. So you see a big blue button at the bottom as you scroll down that says Go to Speech Studio. And here, you can use the studio to try out either the speech to text or the text to speech examples. So if you hit the real-time speech to text button, if you hit that, again, it brings up the a little sample. If you scroll down, there's some audio files that you can use, or you can hit the record button. So you can either browse and drop a file or just hit the record button here.
Cool. Let's try do that. Hi everyone, I'm Abby, and now I'm setting up some cloud services, and I look forward to seeing these come together into an amazing hackathon output.
There you go. You stop this. Again, similar to the example that you saw on the website, you can do the same thing on the Speech Studio. The key difference is that once you download and run the code locally, this allows you to integrate into your own third-party services much easier. But Speech Studio is a great place to start. Similar to speech to text, also text to speech examples. So I'll let our viewers explore those, as they progress with the demo.
Yeah, again, all these portals just mean that I could be not a developer, and I could still have a play with the functionality without worrying about having to set up the studio environment or this user interface.
That's correct, Abby. Now, if we go back to the Azure portal, I wanted to show you two things. One is, how would you share this with a colleague of yours, right? So you've set up the speech service, and you and the other members of your team and the hackathon might want to share the same service instead of each person spinning up their own. So a great way of doing this is to look at the access control blade in the nav bar. So if you hit that, this allows you to add access to others. So if you hit the add button, you can add a role assignment, and here you can choose either one of the built-in roles. So just search for the word speech user. There you go. So if you've got within speech, you can be a user or a contributor. So if you just wanted to give someone portal access without giving them access to the API keys, that's a use case for a user. So let's say that if that's what you wanted to do, if you just hit that, and next, and then select the person or the group that you want to give access here. So maybe if you just wanted to search for myself, and next. And what that means is now when I log in, I can now access your resources. So that's a great way of sharing access with others, and similar to what we'd seen before, I can get access directly to the speech portal. And so, Abby, just like we've given access to others for the speech service, we can do the same things for either the language service or the OpenAI service. For now, let's go back to the resource group and let's have a look at the language service that we created. So similar to the Speech Studio, you'd get a language studio here. So I believe if you scroll down, there should be a link to the language studio. So similarly, if you scroll down, there are a whole bunch of different examples that you could do. So you could do a post-call transcription and analytics. So maybe if you wanted to try that one. Here, there are a whole bunch of different audio files that you can kind of use. And if you scroll down, we should be able to choose one of the 4 different options here that we have. So let's use a dual channel audio for refilling a pharmacy, or either one. And so if you play that file, it plays the transcription, but then the output that you see here has already been analyzed. So it essentially does the same thing. It's calling different language APIs to do either, whether it's PII redaction or we might be hitting sentiment APIs.
Cool.
Cool. And lastly, we've got the Azure OpenAI service.
Oh, let me exit out of that.
Then we'll go back to our resource group, and we've got the OpenAI service that you can go into, very similar to the other two. You can give access to others using the access control blade. The only difference I'd say is, in the access control blade, when you try to grant the type of access, instead of a speech service, you'd search for OpenAI. So just to help others out, let's just do that. So if we hit the access control blade and click on add to give me access, and the role assignment here, instead of searching for the word speech, to search for OpenAI. And if you look at the options that come up here, again, you can give me OpenAI user access. So you don't have to do it again, but just to let the others know that for each service there's a specific kind of access, and that way you can ensure that only the right people have access to the keys and settings.
Cool. We will just skip over that for the purpose of this demo, seeing as you won't be accessing my OpenAI service. And let's jump back to the my OpenAI resource.
That's right. Now, similar to the other resources in OpenAI Studio, so if you can see there's a go to OpenAI Studio. Now, when you create a brand new Azure OpenAI resource, it doesn't actually have any model deployments. So that's the first thing that we need to do for Azure OpenAI. Go to deployments for me, please.
Yeah.
And here, we'll actually create new deployments for the different models. So hit the create new deployment and start by searching a model name from the drop-down list. Now, in the example that we saw earlier, we probably need the DaVinci model. So probably we need text DaVinci 003 and give it a deployment name. I normally recommend that you just keep the same deployment name as the model name, just to make your life easier for the hack. Beyond the hack, you might have different deployment names.
Yeah.
We'll create that.
Right, so what this means is I now have the ability, when I go back into the playground, to use text DaVinci 003 model, but without creating other deployments. It means I can't use the other available models, from which there are obviously quite a few of them.
That's correct, Abby. And we also need for our demo the GPT-3 models. So if you wanted to have a look at that.
So GPT 3.5 Turbo. I will borrow that name in my deployment, and it automatically selects the model version for me, which at the time of the recording is 0301. So we'll keep that as is.
Sure. And these are great for text or chat completions. Again, if you're working with something where you want to predict code, you probably need some of the Codex models. So again, we'll link you to Daniel's wonderful video where he goes into much more details in terms of what all of the different model options that are available. But for now, this should be enough to get us started.
Well, so I think the next step that we got to after setting up the cloud services was to set up my local development environment.
That's correct. So we need a couple of things. This sample's been written with Node, so we probably need Node, Git, and Visual Studio Code. Okay, Abby. So the next thing that we'll do is we'll prepare your environment file.
Cool. I will copy this one here.
Yeah, so just hit that copy icon. And what we need to do is, before anything else, we need to prepare our environment file. Let's open up our entire source folder. So hit on open folder and open up your source code.
Cool. And I will just select this folder.
Yeah. There you go. You can trust the authors.
I trust you, Rohit.
There you go. Thanks, Abby. All right. So our source code is within the source folder. So if you go to SRC, under the API folder, we're going to be creating this environment file. Now, as you can see, there's already an environment sample file that you have here. So what we can do is we can create a new file within this folder and just call it .env. And our environment settings would be read from here.
Oh.
Yeah, and you can paste the content here, or we could have just copied the environment sample to the environment file. Should be the same thing. Awesome. So we'll go through each of the environment variables and settings. So let's Let's go through them one by one. So you've got the app name and the app description. Again, you can just put whatever you want here. Your app name shows up in the title and on the home page. You can now anything that says is optional. You can kind of delete the entire line. Now the app repository optional is purely in case you wanted to link to your own repository. You've got your app logo as well, so you can point to your own logo and you can point to your own favicon. So you can just bin these three. We don't need those.
Yep. So if I had forked your repository and created my own and added some extra functionalities, I might want to populate those. But for this demo, we will go over to language key, region, and endpoint URL.
So here you can see under resource management, you've got keys and endpoints.
Go to there.
Cool. So we're going to need the key, the region, and the endpoint in here. So I'll let you copy those over.
And we'll do the same for the others.
Now, the speech endpoint URL is optional, so you can either delete the whole, probably better to just delete the whole row. This is mostly going to be used if you have a custom speech endpoint. Go to the OpenAI service.
Well, it does not actually ask me for my region.
No, not the region, but here you need the endpoint and the key. So we'll start with the first thing, which is on line 9, which is the OpenAI type. So if this is set to OpenAI, then the only thing that it actually looks at is the OpenAI key. We don't need to care about anything on for any of the Azure resources. But if it is set to Azure, then you need all of the Azure settings to be put in. So we'll just start with Azure. Cool. We'll put in the key afterwards. Again, if it is set to Azure, the OpenAI key is not important, but the OpenAI Azure key is important. So for now, leave that as is. It's just that line gets ignored. We'll chuck in the key later, but we need to chuck in the Azure base URL. So it has to be in that format. The big caveat is there's a trailing slash at the end as well. Now, the Azure API version is optional, but you can default it to what we have here. The one thing I would say is that this version probably changes. So as newer versions come out, make sure that you chuck in the new versions. And then we've got in Azure OpenAI, the names for the models that we created. If you go to model deployments, which is just underneath the keys and endpoints here.
We can see these are the two.
Yeah, that's right. So we need like the deployment name, right? And again, you could name it anything you want, but this is where it's just easier for the hack if we name it the same as the model. So awesome. If you want to save things, chuck in your keys and I can mask it. All right, Abby, now it's time to actually run our demo, right? So here under source, you've got 2 folders. You've got API and UI. Package those up as 2 different apps, and that way you can kind of just run the APIs if you just want to run the APIs, or you can run the APIs and the UIs together. Another small thing that we need to do is we also need to create the environment file for the UI project. So if you go to the UI project, there should be an environment sample.
Yeah.
The only thing there is a port number, and so feel free to change that, but we just need to create a new file within this folder called environment, which just has that setting.
We'll save that. Cool. So I now have 2 terminal windows. If I ls, we can see the 2 folders being the API and the UI folder, which we saw inside VS Code.
All right, so here we'll actually set up the API folders.
Yeah, and we can see my environment's already in there.
Yeah. We'll run an npm install. And then we'll just run the npm start to start the API project. You might need to allow access here.
Yeah. And we'd set up in the environment file, the port was still 8730, so we should be on that port. Cool, so we can see status 200 okay. So now I guess my APIs are set up, and if I wanted to only use the APIs and not use the UI, that is all I would need, but we'd want it to look a little bit better than this.
If there is a mistake in your configuration settings, this would not run because like a validation step starts here. So if for any reason your key was not there or any of the required fields weren't there, you get an error here. Now, the next thing that we'll do is now we'll set up the UI project. So let's go back to our documentation and see the steps that we need to take. Now, we've already set up the environment file, so we don't need to do that, but we'll just run an npm install and then an npm start.
Oh.
So just do a npm run start. There you go.
And here we have it.
Abby, if you wanted to maybe maximize your screen, you've got the same app there. So if you hit the transcribe button, maybe let's just kick off with a quick transcription to make sure that it's all hooked up.
Cool. I will try begin transcription. Hey everyone, Abby here. I'm so excited that I am now running the repository from GitHub locally and having a play and testing whether it works to hit the services that you've just seen me create inside my Azure portal. Excited.
Awesome.
Cool.
All right, Abby. So all of the others should work as expected. And hopefully that gets the team excited about using the AI Hackathon toolkit. Now, the one other thing that I wanted to highlight was we'll just do a quick search for the note to developer in your Visual Studio Code and search for the text that we had.
Cool. So it was called note to developer. Your magic goes here. Cool. We don't want the README ones, but and then the chat tab and etc. So if my developers, all the setup that we've just done, that would have been basically completed in the first sort of little bit of the hackathon. And then as we start playing with, if I had my own SaaS application that I'm using and selling to customers, I could start integrating it in these sections here. And I'm actually writing business logic code and not just setting up, a user interface to play around with the AI services.
All right, Abby. So what are the next steps our fellow hackers can take?
Right, well, actually, to get started with your hackathon, if you are planning to use the Azure OpenAI service, you do actually need to request access. There is a form you need to fill. Just let us know about the use case and make sure you've taken into consideration the responsible AI principles. So we will share the link to the application form. Just make sure you are not trying to do this last minute before your hackathon. Get in there as soon as possible. Whilst you are waiting for access to the service, though, we do have very good Microsoft Learn modules that would be appropriate for any level, whether you're a beginner or experienced, just to get acquainted with the Azure OpenAI service and in general OpenAI's natural language, code generation and image generation capabilities. So this is the introduction learning path, and we also have a slightly more developer focused learning path, which again isn't actually that technical. It just goes through more developer style content, such as getting started, but more importantly, getting acquainted with the Azure OpenAI REST API as well as the OpenAI SDK. So you can see, what's actually going on under the hood behind this app, and when you do want to call these APIs and or the SDK in code. And there are more learning modules getting added, so be sure to save these learning paths, and as new starters join or as you want to get refreshed on it, take a look. And finally, we would not be doing justice to our friend Daniel Scott Rainsford, who we've mentioned a few too many times, but no number of times is enough to do a shout out to his video. It's right here. He goes into a lot more detail about the playground, about prompt engineering, as well as couple sessions on Q&A as well, where he answers some of those most common questions around incorporating GPT and the Azure OpenAI service into your apps. So do check it out. It's probably the best 1 hour I've spent watching a video, since this whole AI thing came about this year. So be sure to check this out as well. And so switching gears into as you do go into your hackathon, or if you have any sort of deep technical questions, the documentation is the place to go. It's super comprehensive. It tells you a lot more details around, what's available, what models, what features, and very importantly for your hackathon, I need to point out this page here, the quotas and limits page, just because you might have multiple people deploying models or lots of users sharing your same model deployment at the same time. Just make sure to check out you're taking into account what the limits are and how they've been set up, so you're avoiding those 429 errors. Other than that, as all documentation, super comprehensive, tells you about prompt engineering techniques as well as a whole lot of other how-tos. Again, if you have questions, come in here and you will probably find your answers. What we didn't actually have time to cover in this hackathon starter kit is actually quite a common question we get asked is, how do I get this sort of Bing chat or ChatGPT style Q&A, but for content that's only in my enterprise, so stuff that's not actually on the internet, but it's within my HR website or within internal content or our customers' internal content. So as the screenshot shows, it is possible you can ask it questions and it can give you citations based on internal enterprise data. So what this actually uses is cognitive search in the background. It uses cognitive search for your internal documents that are not shared in the public, and you can use again Azure OpenAI or GPT, ChatGPT over it. This is on a separate GitHub. It's open source, it's deployable, so you can deploy that and have a play with it if you are interested. And feel free to use this in the hackathon together with our AI starter kit. The next one again is something that we've heard about a lot called orchestrators. Definitely don't have time to go into this, but basically orchestrators are a bit of an abstraction on top of these large language models that also incorporates, enables some extra services as well, and it means you can do templating, chaining, and planning capabilities. Again, we didn't have time to cover this, unfortunately, but this is also open source. It's available on a GitHub, so please do check it out. And with that, you should be seeing on the screen and in the show notes, all these links that I've shared, we will make them available to you. And so with that, I guess, check out the links, share them with your team, with your friends, and all that's left to do is to get started. So we can't wait to see what you build, what comes out of your AI hackathon, and let us know in the comments if the hackathon starter kit has been useful and anything else you'd like to know. So thanks everyone, and thanks Ro for taking me through it.
No worries. Thank you for everything, Abby, and thank you viewers for watching, and let's get hacking.
Let's go.